Binance, which according to Reuters is becoming a hub for fraud and money laundering. Binance is the largest exchange by volume and has been for quite a while. Binance CEO CZ is a well-known figurehead within crypto and perhaps the wealthiest man in the world if you count all his crypto, or at least before the crash. So pretty important people here. And this Reuters investigation found that not only did Binance misrepresent where they were located by saying that they were still operating out of Malta when in fact they were not, but they've also not taken on compliance changes that most other exchanges have. This is a pretty interesting story. Binance has definitely distanced themselves from the claims within this, saying that these are all alleged, they're not factual, they're not true. So definitely need to get that out there, that there seems to be some sort of conversation around this. At the same time, there is some points in this that seem to be fair. And I do think just looking at Binance's position as the largest exchange and the fact that so many people can use it, you're going to get some illicit activity. You're probably going to have the highest percent chance of that illicit activity happening on Binance. Binance operates in most jurisdictions. Notably, Binance is not allowed in the United States. They have a U.S. entity, Binance US, that only lists certain tokens and operates under U.S. guidance. But Binance itself is found all over the world, minus a few jurisdictions that it's not allowed to operate in, like Iran or North Korea or other places. David, I want to throw this one over to you, get your take on it. We do see these regulatory headlines every once in a while, and they're not my favorite because they can be really tough, right? Like looking inside a firm and understanding what's actually happening on the compliance side is very difficult. At the same time, it's some of the most important things that a journalist can do. Looking at the recent fiasco with all these lending firms, I'm sure a lot of journalists and journalistic firms wish they'd been asking these questions a few months back.
Yeah, I mean, the Binance thing bugs me it's difficult to talk about for several reasons. And one overriding one is simply that the KYC and AML regime worldwide is just a broken mess. And so whenever you talk about it, you have to kind of acknowledge that all of these measures and all of these controls essentially are theater to begin with. So the fact that Binance maybe slipped up, I'm going to be a little controversial here, but like, I don't know if I care. One of the parts of the Reuters report was like 7 people in Iran were still able to trade on Binance. And like, I mean, if it's somebody who's moving $50 million that maybe has something to do with the Iran nuclear program, sure, okay. But you know what? They seem to be doing all right on that one without using Binance. So I just like, this is like, I get it. If something untoward took place, then sure. But like people getting sweaty about this, I just don't. I can't work up a head of steam. I can't get mad about it. I don't know. Like I just don't see the significance. I wish I had something more sophisticated to say than that, but.
I had the same mixed bag of emotions reading this article. So there have been a few investigative reports released by Reuters over the past few months when it comes to Binance. I think they said $2.35 billion worth of illicit funds were laundered through the platform. They did a bunch of investigations. They hired a bunch of blockchain sleuths. And for me, reading this on one hand, if they weren't listening to their internal compliance advisors and they weren't, if they were knowingly not complying with regulation, yeah, that's okay. But David, to your point, I think there's so much gray area. Even internally, when you're listening to your legal advisors, you can have different opinions all within one department, and you have to make a decision, a business decision on what you're going to do next. There was a note in the article that said, you know, to open up an account in Binance, all you needed was an encrypted email. You didn't have to identify yourself in any way. And this brought me back to, you know, crypto just being free money. Like, of course, this helps criminals if criminals want to use it to do criminal activity, but this also helps people in oppressive countries who need to move money around, or women in some countries who aren't able to make funds. If they're working on the side to get out of an oppressive situation, they need features like this to do that. And so I also had a mixed bag of feelings.
If I could just really quickly comment on that one, you noted the Reuters story from a couple months ago. I was trying to remember where they cited that 2.3 billion number. I mean, this is just to point out another kind of inconsistency here, right? Reuters reported that number. That's a number that was a cumulative number over like 5 or 6 years, but they put that in the headline, even though it's for this indeterminate span that has no useful comparison to be made to like annualized global money laundering flows. 2.3 billion over 6 years is literally insignificant in the context of the money laundering that takes place worldwide. And that framing of the story by Reuters was frankly not great. So I just wanted to highlight that. Will or Wendy, I don't remember who was on the stack, but go for it.
Yeah, I'll grab it really quick and then toss it up to Wendy. It is really interesting to see these traditional rags like Reuters struggle with the concepts of money moving freely. And I think that is like the true point of Web3 that hopefully comes out of like this entire crash, is like you want to have money move in the same way that data flows over these rails. I can open a Facebook account with very little information. I can open up any sort of account, an email account with very little information. It doesn't matter. And I should be able to receive and send money in the same manner. And we see that with Binance, right? In lots of different countries, you don't need that much information to be able to boot up an exchange and then be able to receive funds for that. One of the most interesting stories on my podcast I did last year was with a few Venezuelan Bitcoin miners. And they're told me about how most people in Venezuela just have Binance accounts now, and they don't even use anything else. They don't use local currency. They just swap between Binance accounts. They have a little QR code, they have their Binance wallet, they go to the store, buy something, and they just scan it, and it sends it right from their Binance account to someone else's Binance account. Binance has dominated that market, and for good reason, right? People needed that access to banking in a way that traditional finance can't even understand. And these traditional writers for financial writing, they don't understand it either. So it's fascinating to see these headlines pop up. It's permissionless money, right? We should be able to send money wherever we want it to go. Wendy, I'll throw it up to you.
Like, let's face it, if somebody wants to do something illicit or bad, they're going to do it. They don't need to use crypto. It's actually easier to do bad things with cash or bartering. Also, too, there was a very interesting thing that you said about people in Venezuela that were actually able to just utilize Binance to pay for everything and to kind of live their lives. That's actually providing a very, very, very valuable service. And then Jed brought up maybe somebody was in an oppressive place or oppressive situation, and they're able to kind of successfully utilize cryptocurrency as a way to secure their freedom or to secure some sort of freedom in the future. And I also kind of want to close this out and say, imagine being the biggest crypto exchange in the world and having to comply on a global level to all of these different countries, to all of these different entities, to all of these different legal bodies, and properly do KYC and AML. There's going to be mistakes that happen along the way. You can only do so much when you're operating on a global scale. So regardless of what people say about Binance, I think for the most part in this particular area when it comes to KYC and AML, they're doing the best that they can with not a whole lot of clarity. Because let's face it, we're still not where we need to be regulation-wise in the United States of America and in other countries.